If you're using Airtable and you're also leveraging automation, there's a good chance that you've had to ask yourself the question of where should I build my next automation? Should I be building automation directly in Airtable, or should I be building it using third-party automation like Zapier or Make? Well, in this video, I'm going to be breaking down both sides of this. When should you use Airtable automations, or when should you go to third-party automation tools? We're going to be talking about the nuanced details through your decision-making process. So if learning more about where to build your next automation is of interest to you, stick around and let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Gareth and this is Gap Consulting. It's my mission here to help you get the full potential out of Airtable and the related no-code tools in the space. And as I mentioned at the top of the video, we're going to be talking about when you should leverage Airtable automation versus third-party automation. But before we get into the heart of it, I first want to invite you to join me for some additional resources. We've put together some free templates that we offer on our website if you sign up with your email, and we have a ton of other resources as well, including a paid course with weekly group coaching calls and optional one-on-one consulting to help you unlock the full potential of your Airtable solution. So if you're ready to go outside of YouTube and you're looking for a little bit more, swing by our website and grab our freebie or check out our course. But without further ado, let's hop on into my screen here. I'm inside of an Airtable interface that I just built. This was done using the AI co-builder, which, side note, unrelated to this video, but if you're not already leveraging AI to build faster and smarter in Airtable, you're really missing out. This is something that we use on almost every single new build that we start because it just really shortens the time to delivery and means that we can get things done more quickly and in our clients' hands. So I strongly recommend that you check out that AI co-builder if you're not using it already. But here I am inside a pretty simple, pretty straightforward Airtable setup. If I were to flip into the back end here, we've only got 3 tables. I've got projects, I have tasks, and I have team members. So of course a team member is going to be assigned to a task, and that makes sense. But we've got all of this information here about our team members, the tasks they're assigned to, and then of course the tasks roll up to the project level, and we're able to track and see how many tasks are there on a given project, how many completed tasks have been knocked out, and then ultimately what's the completion percentage of all the different tasks associated. So let's take a quick dive into our interface because this is where we're going to do most of our work. And by the way, just another side note here, we're still not to the automation part, but I have to mention this because I've worked with some Fortune 500 companies that still are not leveraging interfaces appropriately in their Airtable builds. So interfaces in Airtable, they're the front end layer. This is how you can control who on your team gets to see what information, and more importantly, what can they edit? What can they actually interact with? You have to be using interfaces if you want to lock down your data. Rather than just sharing the backend database, share an interface so that people see exactly what you want them to see and they can do only what you give them permission to do inside of your data. This is really important if you're growing and scaling Airtable inside of any organization. So here I am, I've got 3 different key components. We've got the projects and the tasks, the projects with their task assignment, and then we can go into tasks to see also our team member overview. So it's really just visualization of the different components on the back end that we already talked about. There's 3 core tables: projects, tasks, and assigned team members. And also note that here inside of interfaces, we can plug in and add new tasks here just with a few clicks, right? We're just using native Airtable forms and we're able to add new projects. We're able to come in and, let's put in a test project. We can add information. We can give a start date, end date on the project, set a budget, set a status, all the things that we could do. And there it is, the brand new one. We can open it up and edit it. And as we assign tasks here and as they're completed, we'll see them move through the process. But now the point of our video, of course, is automation. So let's imagine some scenarios in automation. When would we want to leverage Airtable automation versus going into a third-party tool, let's say Zapier or Make or N8N? There are a bunch of different third-party automation tools out there. They all work more or less the same, but they will give you more enhanced automation capabilities. So when should you go outside of the native Airtable environment? Well, my short answer for this is, first and foremost, if you can build it in Airtable, You probably should. And in order to understand why, we should flip over to Airtable's pricing to really get an understanding of why would we leverage Airtable automation before anything else. Assuming, of course, that we are on a team plan, that we're paying something for Airtable, we don't have to be on the high enterprise, we don't have to be on the business, but assuming we're spending something on Airtable, and we look at the automation runs, it's right here, second line down, 25,000 automation runs. Okay, compare that, of course, to the free plan. If you're on the free plan of Airtable, totally respectable if that's where you are in your business. But hey, 1,000 records per base, but we need to go down a little bit further on the checklist. I think it's about checklist 5 or check item 5, 100 automation runs for free, mind you. So why would we want to use this first and foremost? Well, there's no additional cost to our Airtable bill if we are using these automations. So assuming that we're on a certain plan, why not use the automation potential that comes along with that? It's not increasing our bill in any meaningful way to be leveraging automation inside of Airtable. But what exactly is a run? So the way that Airtable qualifies an automation run, it's any time that the automation does its thing. So there could be 10 different steps in your automation. You could find a record, you could create a record, you could update a record, you could then create a Google Doc, you could send an email. If these things are all in one automation, this is one automation run. So that's a lot of automation, folks. We're talking about being able to do 25,000 automation runs. Now, of course, let's imagine that you have a scenario where you've got 10 different automations, different automated processes. Well, then you get 25,000 automation runs spread across those different 10, right? So you could say, hey, on average, each of these could do 2,500 runs itself. That's still a ton of automation in a month. That's a lot. So that is why we tend to say, hey, look, if you're spending money on Airtable already, if you need to have this team plan or better, then why not leverage that automation that's natively built inside of Airtable? But the big caveat here is, can you build it in Airtable? So this is where very often we need to go outside of that environment. But there's another time that we might also need to go outside the environment. It's, yes, if we have surpassed 25,000 automation runs, or if we have built so many automations inside of our database that we cannot add more to that database. Now, this number is a little bit nebulous, right? The number of different automation processes that we can build in Airtable, I say it's a little nebulous. I think it's remained more or less the same over the last year and a half, but it's not published anywhere. And that gives me a little bit of pause. So it could be that Airtable changes this at any point in time. Now, my memory, again, this is not written down anywhere, but my memory, if it serves me, is that when we get to about 50 automations inside of a single database in Airtable, that's when it breaks. That's when it says, hey, you cannot add more automation to this database because you've now reached the limit of the number of automations you can have. So if you have 50 different automations, right, inside of one database, then again, you're going to be looking at however many automation runs. This is number one limitation. Number two limitation is how many different automation processes can you build inside of there. So assuming that I'm right and that it's about 50 where the cap is, then that would be another reason that you might start thinking, well, I need to move outside of this Airtable native environment. So those are the two core reasons. But the third one has to do with automation potential. So number one, if you have already used all of your automation runs in a month, you're going to need to go outside that environment. But if you're using that much automation, you're probably in a really good spot because a lot of your work is being done for you in the background. The second reason, as I said, how many different automations can you build in a single database? I believe it's capped around 50. Let me know in the comments if that's wrong. But the third and perhaps biggest reason that we go outside of Airtable has to do with functionality and also connectivity to different applications. So let's pop back into Airtable and I'll show you what I mean. Airtable has come a long way in their automations, but they are not, first and foremost, an automation tool. Airtable is a database tool. Let's not ever forget what it was built to be. It's a database that allows you to build no-code apps and solutions without needing a line of code, right? That's really impressive, and automations are a component of that, but it's not the core focus of this software. As opposed to a Zapier, a Make, N8N. These tools were specifically made to be the glue of the internet, to connect all of the different tools that we're using on the internet. And so, number one thing when it comes to automation options inside of Airtable is what can you connect to? So let's look at the trigger potentials, right? Triggers are those parts of automation that trigger an automated process and wake it up and tell it to go do the automation. So we're looking at records matching conditions, obviously records in Airtable. A form being submitted, a form in Airtable. A record is created in Airtable. A record is updated in Airtable, right? At a scheduled time, record enters a view. Okay, at a scheduled time, I didn't mean to kind of skip through that one. This is a good one if you have an automation that has to happen on a schedule. But most of the time, that's not the key focus for automation. So then we can go down. We have a couple more here. We will see webhook received. This is big. And then email received. Note that you have to be on that business plan. Also, and by the way, one of my favorites, a button is clicked inside of an Airtable interface. So if I were back here, I could add a button to this interface anywhere I want that triggers an automation. This would allow my team who's in the interface to manually trigger an automated process inside of my Airtable solution. Very, very valuable. But back here, we have other integrations that will trigger things in Airtable. If we keep scrolling down, Google Calendar has the option to, when an event is created or changed or canceled, okay? Google Forms, Google Sheets. So this is a big one. Obviously, a lot of us use Google in our businesses, but if you don't, and you're more of a Microsoft person, you've got Outlook email being received or Outlook calendar event changed or created. So these are your trigger options, right? This is fairly limited. I don't mean to suggest that this is not a robust offering because we can build a lot of automation in Airtable with these limited options. But this is not the full suite of software on the internet, right? There are so many other tools that we could use and probably do in our businesses. I'm thinking about things like Stripe for payment processing, QuickBooks for accounting. We've got Asana for task management that a lot of our clients use. Trello is a popular one as well, right? We have different form software. A lot of people are using things like Typeform or Jotform or Fillout is our personal favorite. So there are so many different tools that you might want to have interacting with Airtable. And when you look at Airtable triggers, you'll find that you don't have a native option for triggering automation using those software. But let's just pick a random trigger so that we can go to the next step of automations, and it has to do with our action steps. So what can we do? Well, first and foremost, within Airtable, we can send an email from Airtable. Note that this is different from sending an email from your Gmail or from your Outlook. This is different. This comes from Airtable. We can create a record in Airtable, update records, find records, sort a list of records that we found, run a script. So this one is kind of aligned with the webhook, right? We can do some custom things with webhooks and scripts, which I'll come back to in a moment. They're more advanced though, so I do kind of want to put a pin in that. If you are a true no-coder and you are scared to use code, you don't really want to dip your toe in that water yet, then just wait until the end of the video and skip that part. Okay. Integrations. What else do we have? Slack, big one. Interoffice communication. We can send messages or send actionable messages. We can do the same thing with Teams in terms of sending messages. We can send email from our Gmail account just as we can send email from our Outlook calendar. We also have access to Hootsuite, Twilio, GitHub, Facebook pages, but still a relatively limited array here of different software. We can also scroll down if we're on the business or enterprise plans. We get access to Jira Cloud, Jira Server, Data Center, and of course, Salesforce. So you can check and see if it's worth it to upgrade for you with these different integrations. But that's it. That's where this caps out for us. And so this is a reason that you might want to go outside of the Airtable environment for your next automation. And it has to do with the tools that you're using. If they're not listed here, it's going to be more difficult for you to write that automation. Is it impossible? Not always. And this is where that scripting and webhook come into play. For example, we might use a webhook to trigger our automation from something that happens inside of our email service provider. So we can set up our email service provider to automatically send a webhook, and then we can use our trigger event. We can change this. Instead of being at a scheduled time, we could say a webhook is received, and we can put that webhook into our email service provider, into Asana, into whatever tool you're using. If it has native webhook capabilities where you can just bring that webhook in, then you can say, hey, whenever this thing happens, let's say you're in Stripe and you say, when I receive a payment, I want you to send a message to this webhook. I'm going to copy it and paste it into Stripe. Then your Stripe account will do that every time your payment is received. Send the information to Airtable, and that will then trigger your automation. So this is a more advanced option for you. But if you don't want to get into the code stuff, this is when you might say, hey, hold on. Let me just find the easier path here. Let me open up Zapier, because inside of Zapier, I have the ability to create a new automation. And when I look at my triggers here, I mean, if this is your first time in Zapier, you're going to get a little cross-eyed. There are 3,000 or more different software. Oh gosh, it's 7,000 now. 7,000 apps and tools that Zapier now connects with. So I can build a connection directly from Stripe where I say, hey, I found Stripe from a list. What are my trigger events? Gosh, you remember how Airtable had just a few, like for each different software? I mean, Zapier, this is their bread and butter. This is what they do. So it's so many different options, and it's so much easier to build something here, and Zapier will do all the heavy lifting for us on the back end. So let's flip now back to Airtable and take a look at some other of the limitations to Airtable's automations. If you're getting more advanced, you might have to put in some conditional logic where you can say, hey, I only want certain conditions to be met if you're going to go down and perform the next few steps. So let's say, for example, we created a task and we have two types of tasks. And depending on the type of task that's created, then, maybe we assign it to a different person. So we could build conditional logic here and say, hey, if it's task 1, then I want you to do this. And if not, I'll create another condition, and then I can build different action steps within these different conditions, right? But this is not quite as robust as what you would find in a Zapier or a Make when it gets to the more complicated or complex pathing that you might build. So inside of a Zapier or Make, you'll have an option to do pathing, as I alluded to, and we can just bring that up right here. And with pathing, we can build out these different processes, and we can add multiple paths just as easily as you might imagine. Here's another path. We can establish the different conditions. And the cool thing with paths is it just makes it a little bit easier for us to visualize what our actual automation is doing. Again, this is Zapier. You have similar capabilities inside of Make, etc. And then we can build loops inside of our paths and paths inside of our loops and all kinds of fancy things. So if you're looking to do looping in Airtable, for example, we struggle to do that inside of our different conditions that we've set up here. But let's get rid of these different conditional parts, and I'll come back to the original action. We can add an advanced logic or action. Here's that repeating group, the loop. Right? So if we found, let's say, 3 or 4 records in Airtable and we wanted to take some action on each of those records, we can do that. But Airtable's a little limited in this way. Because of the fact that Airtable automations are mostly built with Airtable in mind, our functionality within a repeating group is a little bit limited. So we could, of course, as I mentioned or alluded to, we could have a find records here. So we could find records, and then we could say for each record that we find, and we can map this to that find records action. And then we could take a certain step, and we would take it every time for each record that we identified that we found in this previous step. We can do similar stuff inside of Zapier though, and it gets a little bit easier. So diving into an action inside of our path, we can look for loop, and looping is available here. Note that I can add this loop inside of my path. And back over here, if we were on our different paths, which I was earlier, we don't see the option for looping. So Airtable, again, automations here are not quite as robust. So if you need to do some more advanced stuff with paths and loops and, all kinds of complexity in your automation, this might not be the best fit for you. But that being said, I'll go back to what I was saying earlier. Airtable has scripts in addition to their webhook triggers. So If you have that more advanced function that you want to do, you could always pop open a script. So I could come right here and run a script. This does require that you're on a paid plan. Again, that's kind of my assumption here in this discussion, but we could write whatever script we want, test that script, and then it would be a part of our automation. This could involve looping. It could involve all kinds of different things, all kinds of complex conditional logic. We could put all of that in a script. Now, that sounds daunting, especially to someone like me who does not know how to code. But ChatGPT, my friends, has come so far in such a short amount of time. It's doing so much coding now that it's pretty simple for you to say, hey, this is my scenario, ChatGPT. Please produce the code. It will do so. It might take a little bit of troubleshooting, but you can plug that in and pretty quickly have a working automation inside of Airtable. So how do you take all of this random information that I've shared and put it into a meaningful thing, like a meaningful framework for you that you can digest so that you know quickly, where am I going to build my next automation? Here it is, my short version. Number one, try to build it in Airtable. If you can't build it in Airtable because the software is not supported in Airtable, you'll very likely need to go to a third-party tool. If you are stuck in Airtable because you have advanced functions that you want to get accomplished inside of your automation, and maybe Airtable's native automation doesn't allow for that, then I would say pop open a script. Use ChatGPT, try to have that script written for you if you don't know how to write some JavaScript on your own already, and pretty quickly you'll get that worked out. That is option 2. And then third and final, if option 2 fails you, head on over to Zapier 100% of the time. Zapier, Make, N8N, they can handle those more advanced automations. That's what they're built for, but keep your Zapier cost as low as possible. Let's pop in over to Zapier and I'll show you exactly what I mean on the different plans. Now, I am on a grandfathered plan. I don't think it's still available, but inside of Zapier, you have, it can get costly. And the way that they count your bill is by tasks. Very different from the way Airtable thinks about it. An automation run in Airtable is an entire process, one big automation doing its thing. In Zapier, every action inside of your automation is part of your count. So that's what your limitation is. How many tasks are you using? Every action that is not a native Zapier action. So anytime you're taking some action step, it's going against your available plan right there. Now, there are some more robust things inside of a Zapier or a Make that you definitely want to leverage. Things like AI agents, chatbots, interfaces, tables. I mean, there's a lot of other advanced things, but use it sparingly. I hope you got a ton of value from this video. I know I spoke a lot and there's probably a lot of questions that you have around this specific to your different automations. So swing by our website, grab some of those free resources and get some help if you need it. I hope you got a ton of value. If you did, we'd love a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Most importantly though, keep on building.